sometimes controversial, always politically incorrect, and pro-life without exception, without compromise, and without apology. It's the Pro-Life America podcast with your hosts, Sarah Waits and the president of Life Dynamics, Mark Crutcher.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Pro-Life America podcast. I'm Mark Crutcher, as you heard. And you also heard that lurking nearby is my charming co-host, Sarah Waits.
Thank you. Charming co-host.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to be nice to you. You need
It's a struggle some days, right?
It is. I have to really go outside myself to do that. But,
well, I appreciate your struggle. Thank you for your restraint.
Yeah. We've got I think, a very interesting guest lined up for today. Mm-hmm. And it's somebody that I met many, many years ago. She went to a seminar. I used to do the Life Activist seminars. And her name is Donna Murphy. She joins us right now from Ohio. Hello, Donna.
Hello, Mark.
How are you doing?
I'm wonderful. It's a sunny, beautiful day here.
Yeah, here too.
Yeah.
And, it's really nice here.
Nice. It's good that we have a few beautiful days before
it starts getting 125 degrees every day.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
When I was in college, there was a foreign exchange student that I met, and he was talking about walking everywhere, and he was from Scotland. Yeah. And he was like, oh, I'm going to walk from the campus to the mall. And I was like, no, you cannot do that. Right. You're used to 80 degrees. It gets to be 100, and you can't walk that distance, not without passing out.
And your feet will be covered with blisters by the time you get there. But anyway, Donna, you are the director of an agency called Heaven's Gain Ministries. Tell us real quickly what that's about.
Our mission at Heaven's Gain is to help with the physical, emotional, and spiritual needs of families who've lost a baby before, during, and after the delivery of that baby.
So that'd be through miscarriage or a stillbirth or...
Yes, or early infant death.
Or abortion. I
mean, they can have had abortion before, but we don't assist in any type of termination.
Well, I know you don't do that. I'm just saying that you would counsel with someone who'd had an abortion and maybe regretted it or...
Yeah, we could talk to them, yes, but it's primarily those who've had miscarriage and stillbirth. But some of them have had abortions earlier, right? Yeah. And then they realize what's going on.
Well, the reason I wanted to have this show was one of the problems that I've seen throughout the pro-life movement in all the 40 years that I've been involved in it is that even the most pro-life people don't always look at the unborn in the same way they look at the born. Even though our argument is that the unborn child from the moment of fertilization has the same right to life as someone that's 3 years old or 5 years old or 50 years old.
Yeah.
They understand that intellectually, but they don't necessarily emotionally process that.
I think you see the difference in that when you see pro-lifers talk about partial birth abortion as opposed to just the standard D&E or D&C abortion procedures. As if there's some sort of difference in barbarity or the fact that a child is killed.
Or also, they get more upset the later in the pregnancy. Mm-hmm. The more the baby looks like us, the more upset we get about it.
Yeah.
And what Donna deals with is something similar to that in the reaction that people have toward a woman that suffered a miscarriage or a stillbirth. And they seem to apply a different standard to a woman that has a miscarriage or a stillbirth than they would to a woman who, say, lost a 5-year-old.
That's absolutely true.
And I can tell you this from experience. My wife and I had several miscarriages, one of twins. And then we had a baby that was born with a condition called Meckel-Gruber syndrome, and she died. So I've been through this on a personal level, and I have seen exactly what you're talking about, Donna.
Yeah, people will say, oh, that aborted baby could have been the next Einstein or Bach or Mother Teresa, but they don't ever think that the missed baby missed some purpose in this world. Or should even be missed. Like they think, oh, well, that was God's plan. You should just be happy for God's plan. And nobody's happy when their baby dies.
Yeah.
That's not the way it is.
Well, it can still be God's plan and you can still be upset and mourning that loss. The two don't cancel each other out.
No. And you know what's interesting about this is I think that one of the people who picked up on this, and I hate to even bring up his name, George Tiller, the abortionist up in Kansas, the late-term abortionist, he used to try to sugarcoat what he did by killing these unborn babies by calling them induced miscarriages. Did you ever hear that, Donna?
I have never heard of that term before, but I do know that some of the pills that are used for abortion are also used for miscarriage. because, the baby is just not passing and it's been weeks. And so people take the same medicine and they feel that guilt of, I'm taking an abortion drug.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's not surprising that they change the terminology because they don't want to say the words abortion. So they'll say things like choice or induced miscarriage or termination in order to
take the stigma away from it.
Yeah.
And the abortion industry thought, you can go back and read stuff that they wrote back in the late 60s and early 70s, that once abortion was legal, the stigma would go away, that legality would take the stigma away. Well, we're 50 years almost into this deal, and I think the stigma is higher today than it was then. And the reason for that is very simple. We've had more discussion about the unborn child.
Well, and medical technology has come a long way since 1973.
Exactly. One of the things I wanted to ask you, Donna, because I saw this myself, when you deal with, for example, not just a woman, but the woman and her husband, and they've suffered a miscarriage, do you see that the public treats the woman different than they treat the husband?
So oftentimes they'll say to the husband, how's your wife doing?
Right.
But they don't ask the husband how he's doing at all. And that's one of the things we try and promote is, if you work with somebody, whether it be the woman or the man who is going through this, it's not just a physical thing to lose a baby. It's an emotional and it's a spiritual attack. And these things need to be addressed. And so if you know somebody who's the dad of a baby who's been lost due to miscarriage or stillbirth, ask how he's doing, because he is suffering the loss of his child too.
Yeah.
Well, see, this is part and parcel, or it's related to something we've talked here about many times.
And we talked about last week.
About how the abortion industry has separated women and their babies and basically cast the fathers of these babies that they kill in these abortion clinics out onto the ice floe as if they don't exist and that the baby is none of their business.
As if this is not their child, as if they had no role in creating this life. Basically, men just have no say until the child is born. Then the whole dynamic in their minds changes.
Well, I experienced this a couple of times when my wife had miscarriages and we had gone to the hospital and the baby was expelled. Even I felt, as the father of these babies, that the connection was closer between the baby and my wife than the baby and me.
Yeah.
And
because she was carrying the child.
My mode, I guess it's because men have this protection gene built into them. I went into protecting my wife mode at the hospital and even later at home. And I never felt like that it was my place to worry about me in this situation. I only worried about my wife.
That's sad.
Yeah. And I experienced exactly what Donna said a moment ago. And I experienced this even when our daughter Jackie died. And she had been born, of course. But I took off a week or 10 days. And when I came back to work, people were coming up to me and saying, oh, we're so sorry to hear about what happened. How is your wife doing now?
Wow.
And it was almost like, and I'm sure this is what you've seen, Donna, it's almost like the baby was the child of the mother, but not of the daddy. He's not really the father until the baby's born.
Yeah, some people totally act like that, and that's just not right. I know when we lost Gabriel, that the first thing my husband wanted to do was to provide for me and to provide for our baby. He was like, we need to go get a casket for our son. And he wanted to provide a resting place for him. And people just acted like we were crazy because he was only 8 inches long. Like, why would we want to bury him if he's only 8 inches long? Like, there's no such thing made. We went to 4 funeral homes and 2 cemeteries. Nobody had anything to bury him.
You're kidding.
And then we went...
Wow.
No. And then we started calling funeral homes, and one said, go to an import store, get yourself a box. So we went to an import store, bought a box. I went home and tried to kind of sew some kind of linens for it. And we went in to deliver the baby the next day, and we placed him in that box. And my husband was just like, that's not respectable. That's not showing any dignity to our baby, like to not have anything to bury him in.
Yeah.
Later on, we found out that there's less than 20 states that actually even give parents the right to bury their miscarried child.
You're kidding.
And a miscarried child depends on what state you live in. You know, in some states, a miscarried baby is 19 weeks or less. In some states, it's 23 weeks or less. Some states, it's 15 weeks or less. So it varies according to the state. But no matter what, if you want to give peace to these parents, you need to pass laws in your state. Like Ohio has the Parents Grieving Act, which we helped write a letter about so that they would pass it, so that all parents in the state of Ohio have the right to claim their baby's remains and bury or cremate that baby no matter what the gestation of pregnancy is. And then we started Heaven's Gate Ministries. In the beginning, it was just cash and urns for these babies. But then since then, we have expanded to now we're actually training pregnancy centers on what to do when find out that there is no heartbeat when they give an ultrasound to an abortion-minded women. A lot of times those women just think that they'll be relieved, but they mourn those babies too.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Donna, years ago, we had a situation in which, and this was not abortion related, so we weren't involved in it too deeply, but this woman had called us and she had had a miscarriage, and I think she was 12 or 13 weeks. It was right at the end of the first trimester that she miscarried her baby. And she was in the hospital, and she had had some physical problems related to it herself, so they're taking care of her. And when they released her, like the next day or the day after that, she mentioned to the admitting people as they were letting her out of the hospital, okay, how do I go about taking care of my baby? I want to have a funeral service for my baby.
Oh, no. I have a feeling I know where this is going.
The baby was gone.
Oh,
and she was told, she was standing at the counter, and she said, I was told by this woman, the fetus was disposed of as medical waste. That happened yesterday.
Wow.
And she never had.
That is so common.
Yeah, it's medical waste. They're telling this woman who may
her child is just basically waste.
It's just trash. We just took it out and threw it out in the trash.
It's disgusting. But, you know, this kind of shows the impact that abortion has had on the medical community and on our culture in general.
Right. It's really sad. And this lady was she started out being very angry.
Oh, yeah.
And then she moved into being just incredibly sad. And that's kind of the point at which we came in contact with her.
You're stripping from parents their ability to go through the steps of grieving like they would for, say, a 5-year-old or a 16-year-old. Well, taking those steps of burying and putting them in the ground, saying goodbye. Those are important.
Well, she told me that she and her husband had, while she was still in the hospital, had set up and talked about what they had planned to have a service and the relatives be there and so forth. And she said, then all of a sudden they just casually say it was disposed as medical waste yesterday. And she said, it's like they were saying to me, what are you so upset about? You didn't lose
her child had never existed. Yeah.
You didn't lose anything. You know, you can take this baby home. What's the big deal?
Yeah, that happens in so many places. And, you know, in the pro-life movement, we get really upset because we find out about these abortionists who have these babies in their house or their car or their refrigerators. Yeah. But the same thing is happening in the hospitals. They're being dumped in medical waste. They're being put in biohazard bags. I have a friend who had a baby at 19 weeks. So this is a 9-inch long baby, right? And they put it in a biohazard bag right in front of her.
Yeah.
Right in front of her, they put that baby in a biohazard bag. And that was after this law was passed in the state of Ohio. I mean, why would you do that right in front of a mom? And so in the pro-life movement, we have to try and be consistent. So to say, yeah, these are real babies. Yeah, you do have the right to grieve. Moms and dads have the right to grieve because they've lost these babies and they truly were babies, forever be missed.
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus says, can a mother forget in comparison to how much God loves us? Like, that's his comparison. So we can never forget our children. Yeah, the pain becomes less, but we'll never forget them.
Yeah.
And so many women, I mean, call me like all the time saying, I lost my baby years ago and I left him at the hospital. And where are they? And then, you know, you have to say, well, they could be in medical waste, which is so horrible.
Yeah.
Oh, one of the things I wanted to tell you was in the states that don't have laws protecting the rights for parents to bury their baby that are miscarried, there aren't laws the other way, though. It's a gray area. So usually what it is it's our hospital policy to place these babies in medical waste. And you can fight hospital policy, you know, but it's better to have laws that protect you. But those of you who do lose a baby, you can fight that in states where there is no law protecting your rights.
The abortion industry has done a really good job over the last 50 years of convincing a certain element within the American population that the unborn child is nothing. So don't get all jacked up about it if you have a miscarriage. I mean, it's illogical to say, as they say, that having an abortion is no big deal. It's just a little simple 5-minute procedure, and it's no big deal. And then come out here and also say, and you will hear them say this, that women never regret their abortions, that this is a made-up thing by the pro-life movement, that they just don't do it. When you take that kind of position, you can't expect it then not to bleed over into the issues of miscarriages and stillbirth.
Yeah, the abortion mentality taints the medical community, not just their bedside manner, but how they treat that life and how they look at their obligation to save that life.
Yeah, like you were saying earlier, Sarah, the legalization of abortion has destroyed not only, I think to a large degree, maternal instincts in this country, but it has also destroyed the value of the unborn child within the medical community. Mm-hmm. And so they're fully capable of standing in front of a woman as she's checking out at the hospital saying, oh no, your baby, it's medical waste. We just throw it away. I don't know how do we put this genie back in the bottle?
Well, I just think it needs to become less stigmatized to talk about miscarriage and stillbirth. For instance, a lot of people hide the fact that they're pregnant till later on. With my first miscarriage, the day before I miscarried, I was starting to tell people, and then I found out I was miscarrying, but I had hidden it for 14 weeks. Mm-hmm. And then I felt like I denied my child's life, his entire life. Right. And so it's really important that we say there is a baby inside me. I am, a new mother, a new father, whatever it is. From the time we find out that that baby is alive, that's one of the things we can do. And that also, when somebody does have a miscarriage, they don't have to hide it. They can say, yeah, this is something that I mourn. This is a child I will miss for the rest of my life. Right. And that is normal. I always tell moms that call me and they start crying. They're like, I'm so sorry. And I say, no, a good mom cries when she loses her child.
Yep.
You must be a good mom.
That's right. One of the things that I've said about women who are grieving abortions, I've heard pro-abort say, well, some of these women are mentally unstable to begin with, and so their grief over this abortion is nonsense. My argument is that the women who grieve over abortions are the ones who are mentally more healthy than the woman who doesn't.
Well, and I would argue there's probably a greater percentage of women who mourn and grieve over their abortions than the women who don't. I would imagine that the women who don't are probably a minority.
And I think that we've got to be very concerned about the mental health of any woman who pays some goon at Planned Parenthood to butcher her babies.
And feels nothing.
And then says, oh, I don't regret it. I don't even think about it. It's no big deal. That woman's got problems. That woman's got real problems. Donna, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but we have dealt with a lot of post-aborted women over the years, many of them. And one of the things that we discovered early on in dealing with these women is that almost all of them who've had abortions can tell you the due date of the baby that was killed. So they've already acknowledged that this is a baby.
Yeah.
And I'm going to bet you that most of the women, if you were to find women who've had miscarriages, I bet you most of them are going to know the due date of that baby.
And how old their child would be if they were still alive. Yeah.
Right.
That's absolutely true. I can tell you all three of the due dates of the 3 babies that I lost. And I think that's true of almost every one. As opposed to your living kids, you might remember their due date. But, the day they actually, were miscarried or whatever, we call those angel-versaries. And so that's usually the date we celebrate.
Yeah, I think it's extremely important that these women who have abortions know the due date.
Yeah.
I don't think you can underestimate the importance of that. I think it is very vital because why would they remember the due date? Why would they do that? Somebody needs to be studying that. Of course, you and I know the reason they do because they recognize that it's a baby.
Well, they're not going to study that because the American medical community is turning a blind eye or trying to turn a blind eye towards any research that shows that abortion has adverse consequences, whether it be physically or mentally, on the woman. They don't want to recognize that because it's abortion no matter what.
Yep, that's right. That's exactly right.
Well, and those due dates allow that woman to think about, oh, that child right there, that 4-year-old, that's what my baby would look like. That 6-year-old, that's what my baby, they're thinking about all of what could have been and all the things that they missed.
Yep, I've had several women tell me that after their abortion, they started looking at babies and then toddlers and then preschoolers and all the way up to teenagers and imagine that child is the child they aborted. They said, that's what my baby would look like right now.
And the medical community does not want to recognize that those women are grieving. Just think about, for a minute, the harm that's being done to those women by denying that anything is going on.
Yep. Well, I've had several of these women say, I sometimes wonder if I was going crazy. I'm sitting here grieving about this baby and crying myself to sleep at night years after it happened. And people are saying it's no big deal. And I'm thinking, am I nuts? Am I going crazy here? And the same thing would be true with miscarriage. Yeah, the same thing happens with
miscarriage.
Right. Yeah.
I imagine you guys think of like, well, Jackie would be doing this now or whatever. You think about it and then you think, am I going crazy because I'm thinking about all these things? Yep. Especially, with miscarriage, when it's an earlier loss, because our world, even the pro-lifers are, why are people grieving this? But they seem to understand why people would be upset at abortion. Of course, these women, these fathers, these mothers, they're going to be upset and they're going to be thinking about, what their child would be doing at that point.
Absolutely. And I do that. I'll tell you this. I haven't mentioned this to very many people. We're in a university town. The University of North Texas is here in Denton. And where our office was located, I could drive through the campus to get to our office. There were times when I went to the UNT campus and see a girl there walk into class and say, that's how what Jackie would look right now.
She would be that age.
She'd be that age. And I think that's how Jackie would be right now.
Well, I can tell you that a topic that's even less talked about than the parents is the siblings of miscarried children. Because as a sibling, there's that mentality where you wonder, what would my sibling be like right now? How old would they be? Would we be close? Right. And especially if you don't have any siblings, you wonder what you missed out on too. And there's not that space to really talk about it because, it's your parents who lost, that's their loss. But at the same time,
it's yours too.
It's yours too.
Well, I'll give you a good example of that. A lot of people don't know this. Elvis Presley was one of a twin.
Yeah, exactly.
And his twin brother died in birth. And they say that until Elvis Presley himself died, years later, that he was haunted by that. And he talked about it all the time, talked about his twin brother that died when he was born. And I've talked to other people that have had similar experiences to that. And I'll guarantee you that when a sibling finds out that, it's one thing to say the child died in a miscarriage, but when that child finds out that his mother had that child intentionally killed, you're not going to tell me that doesn't affect how that child relates to the mother. You're not going to tell me that doesn't happen. It has to. You
have to think, what makes me different from that? Would you have killed me? There's that kind of loss of trust there.
Right. And the survivor syndrome that people have. And I've seen that firsthand. I'm the age where a lot of my friends were in Vietnam, and I had friends that were killed there. And I know I can tell you for sure that one person I knew was in a helicopter that crashed, and there were 8 people in the helicopter, and he was the only one that survived. All the 7 other ones all died in the helicopter crash. He had major problems. Now, he died not long ago himself from effects of Agent Orange. But he had, and he talked about it, he had years and years of problems from having been the only survivor. Lived, why me?
What made me special?
Well, one thing he told me one time, and I didn't have that many conversations with him about it, but one thing he told me was, I sat there and looked at some of these other guys, and I'm thinking, he was a better guy than me.
Yeah.
He was a better person than me. Why did he die and I survived? And that this is an issue with children of parents who had abortions.
Or even children of parents who had miscarriages. You wonder, why did I survive?
Right.
While my siblings did not.
But at least your mother didn't choose that.
No, absolutely. You're right.
But yeah, the miscarriage is going to have that same effect.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, Donna, I appreciate your being with us. I just wanted
Thank you for having me on.
I just wanted to touch base with you on this issue. And I think it's very important what you're doing because even though most people may not see this as part of the pro-life movement, it is part of the pro-life movement.
Absolutely.
Because it shows the value and reinforces the value of the unborn child. And I just want the pro-life movement to do a better job of emotionally recognizing that mothers of and fathers of miscarried babies have traumatic experiences with that as well as abortion.
Donna, if someone wants to reach out and contact your ministry or learn more about your ministry, where can they go?
They can go to our website at heavensgain.org. That's heavens, no apostrophe in the S, gain, GAIN.org.
We'll put the link to that in our description so people can click to that.
Well, thank you, Donna, for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on.
And we really appreciate the work that you're doing.
You too. And thank you so much for your life activist course. It got me really, really involved in the pro-life movement.
Well, thank you very much.
So thank you.
Take care, Donna. Bye-bye.
Bye, Donna.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Again, I will put the link to Heaven's Gain Ministries in our description if you want to go check them out. And of course, there's links to our website if you want to check out more of the stuff that we do. And make sure you follow the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. We're on so many different ones, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and the list goes on. And of course, get your friends to listen to this episode and all the other ones. And get them to subscribe.
We appreciate your being with us. Until next Thursday, remember, Life Dynamics is not here to put up a good fight.
We're here to win.
Because winning is how this killing stops. We'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.
Bye.